Nobody said anything. Nobody signed anything. They fueled them up with a tank behind a Jeep, he said, but fueled up with the engines running and re-engaged the rotors, and off they went.
Now, this was an official U.S. Air Force helicopter and crew that invited your dad to go on this trip, right?
That is my understanding, yes.
So your father is flying in a U.S. Air Force helicopter for 2 hours, going pretty much straight east of Unalakleet, Alaska, in the spring of 1978. And he gets a warning that before they land, that there is going to be all kinds of radar and other issues with the helicopter.
Oh, absolutely. He said, look, we've been told that whatever the heck they're dealing with here is going to screw up all of the electronics on this aircraft. We're ready for that. We can fly through that. We're not going to remain on radar. We've got DFR conditions, so don't panic when you hear everything hitting the fan. It's not like we lost an engine or the rotors are coming off or anything. So whatever they were told, they were not at all concerned that they could fly through it.
Doesn't it sound like the crew on this helicopter had done this before?
Either that or they believed whoever briefed them that not to worry about it.
When they landed, they have these 3 machined, very heavy cases in the helicopter.
Yes.
6 men in black uniforms that are unidentified come and they take out these 3 cases. Yes. And then the pilot remains on the ground with the engine running while somebody goes to a Jeep, gets fuel from the back, and puts it into the helicopter while it's still running.
It wasn't a full tanker. It was a trailer behind a Jeep, which had a pump on it. They pumped it into the fuel tank while the thing was running. That's not standard procedure, I can tell you that.
And on the ground, they had military guns. They were in front of people who had armaments aimed at them the whole time the refueling was going on, correct?
Yeah, he said there's a guy standing in the back of a Jeep with a .50 caliber mount pointed at the helicopter.
That .50 caliber machine gun could have taken that helicopter down?
Oh, in 2 seconds.
Okay, and above the whole scene was something like a C-130 that was rotating above.
That is correct. The whole time. I said to my dad, so they're standing there with a .50 cal pointed at you? He says, yeah. I even said to the major, whose side are we on here? Who the hell are these guys? He didn't say a word. And then the guys came to unload. He said, I knew I should just keep my mouth shut. I wasn't even supposed to be there.
The clearly identifiable mine shaft elevators at this remote place had razor wire around them in addition to all the people with guns.
Yeah. I said, electrified razor wire? He says, well, I don't think it was to keep polar bears from falling down the hole. I can tell you that. That's what he said. Electrified fence, do not approach.
Did your father ever give you any more details about where he thought this location was in relationship to, say, Mount McKinley or any of the mountains?
Well, it's interesting because he said it couldn't have been that far from Denali. He did say, we went for a long ways. He said, we couldn't have been that far away from McKinley.
Could you repeat what the pilot of that helicopter said to your father about what he and his co-pilot knew was underneath that ground?
He told my dad, quote, this is as super secret a situation as the Manhattan Project was. He said, nobody is supposed to know this place even exists. And, quote, this thing is some kind of power generator, and it's thousands of years old. It's made out of stone like a pyramid. They don't know where it came from, who made it, or how it works. But it could generate enough power to power the whole North Slope, all of Alaska, and probably the whole country of Canada. And he said, we're not even supposed to know what we're delivering. 6 years later, over lunch with the chief engineer of the television studio at Bell Labs in Murray Hill, talking about vacation, and the guy says, oh, yeah, a bunch of guys from the labs in Western got recruited by somebody in the government to go up to the North Slope to look at some power generating station they couldn't figure out.
And if there is a stone pyramid that is maybe twice the size of Cheops, underground in Alaska, at least 150 feet down to the vertex and down to 700 feet to the base, and that it has been built thousands of years ago, according to what the pilots had heard, and that it can generate enough energy to power the nation of Canada. What is the relationship between that stone pyramid underground in Alaska and Cheops and all of the pyramids that have been built around this planet, many of which are allegedly underground for reasons unknown, or at least under dirt for reasons unknown? Who built all of these pyramids? And if they were machines for energy, why is it that our government wouldn't allow all of this pyramid energy to be used on this planet?
As I related in the email, it's a little hard to believe we have these blips in the development of knowledge of mankind. You go from the Israelites wandering around in the desert and subsistence living to society that can build structures that we can't even emulate today with all our technology, and then we drop back into the dark ages. You know, I don't think that society is nonlinear like that. To me, that on its surface says there's something not right. How can you have the mass structures in the Yucatan and the Mayans, the Aztecs, and then it goes back to barely scratching out a living and having not enough knowledge to feed yourself? That doesn't make sense.
And what you mean is that the very nature of high intelligence and high technology, as it is even seen in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey 12,000 years ago, and the pyramids and the stone circles around the planet, imply that some other intelligence that is not Homo sapien has been working on this planet, terraforming and building these structures for their means, their agendas, completely separate from the evolving track of Homo sapien.
Yes. Why, Linda, is it so impossible and so improbable and so inconceivable that we were not colonized here for the exact same reasons that we are currently discussing colonizing another planet, Mars?
For some reason, for a very long time, the power-greed structure of this planet, which in and of itself might not be entirely human, seems to have had a self-interest in keeping the general evolving human population from knowing the truth. And that is where we are. Policies of denial are still in place. And until those policies of denial are officially lifted, scenes, as your father described, occurring 2 hours east of Unalakleet, Alaska, in the mid-1970s, will keep occurring on this planet while people are still told that we are alone in the universe. That is the first huge lie.
You couldn't be more correct, and that's why I came forward. And you know what? I have run into so many pilots that have said to me in the last 25 years that I've been in cockpits and behind the scene where they said, look, you know what? I got 13,000 hours. I flew B-24s in World War II. I'm ready to retire. And I really don't give a flip if you'll believe me or not. I know what I saw. I saw this. And quite frankly, somebody needs to hear this before I take a dirt nap. So sooner or later, the tide will turn because the volume of documented evidence that folks like you have gone out on a limb and fought to bring to the public's attention will turn the tide.
I hope we will turn the tide. And I have been very curious about how this huge underground pyramid might have been detected all the way back possibly to the World War II era or after. And I talked about this with the retired Navy captain who to this day has asked to remain anonymous but has helped immensely over the last several weeks since I returned from Turkey and did the first story about this underground pyramid at the end of June of 2012. And when I said, how do you think our government detected this? Here is something that he has written to me that I would like to share with our audience because I think it goes to the heart of probably the truth of how we came to know about something in Alaska that may have been there for thousands of years. Quote, the Dew Line early warning system that we built in the early 50s took some 8,000 to 10,000 scientists, engineers, and construction workers into the wilderness that had once seen only the occasional hunter, trapper, gold miner, or native Alaskan village, or a family whose primary concern was survival, hunting food, or searching for gold and silver. But in the planning of the White Alice and Dew Line systems, there was one additional interest in the location and construction of the sites picked for a wax facility or dew line antenna, and that interest was electromagnetic interference. Anyone who has tried to listen to his or her AM car radio when you drive by a high-voltage power line knows what EMI is, although maybe by a different name. We call it static, radio static. EMI from the high-voltage power lines interferes with radio reception and makes it almost impossible to hear or understand what is being received. This is no different with a complex long-range and at the time sophisticated over-the-horizon communication system like White Alice that we were putting together up in the Alaska area. In fact, due to the nature of how the White Alice system operates, using backscattered signals caused by atmospheric turbulence, which in effect causes radio signals to bounce off the ionosphere and back down to Earth over the horizon to receiving stations hundreds of miles away, it is even more sensitive to electromagnetic interference because the atmosphere has propagation issues. There are sunspot effects from the sun. There are solar flares that produce the northern lights. That selecting the proper location for the antennas would be critical. Is it surprising to think that in planning for the installation of the White Alice system in the mid to late 1950s, which was part of our Dew Line effort to set up an early warning system to protect us from and for us to be able to know what might be coming from the Soviet Union over the North Pole, and taking and recording EMI levels at proposed White Alice sites, that someone might have detected an unknown source of extremely high EMI activity, and yet there would be nothing that could be seen that was causing the problem. Assume that you were part of a scientific team tasked with finding the unknown source of the extremely large EMI signature using a variety of highly technical measurement surveys to try and locate that signal, and finally determine that nothing was there. No structures were on the surface of Alaska. Nothing, at least, on the surface. It is easy, therefore, to think that once the location of the EMI source was located, and with the Cold War tensions that existed between the U.S. and Soviet Union, and that a remote location in the Alaskan wilderness was identified as the location of a large unknown source of EMI, that due to its remote nature in Alaska, it would have seemed possible for a team of maybe Soviet military engineers to be in that country undetected and buried in the ground with some type of EMI generator that could disrupt the White Alice and Dew Line radar and communications, maybe because they thought maybe somebody was trying to do something where they could attack us. And instead, when they went there and they started going underground, they discovered a large stone pyramid, perhaps 4 times the cubic volume of Cheops in Egypt.
Wow, Linda, you know, somebody's got to go up there and take a look at that, and I hope that happens.
Yes, so do I.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I thank you, Linda, and I want to just talk a little bit more, ask you a couple more questions about this. For example, there's no indication whatsoever. It just must be very, very old.
We know that there are pyramids all over this planet, some under dirt, perhaps in Bosnia and China, and in
the Antarctic.
And then there are those that we know above ground, and now the issue is raised. How many large pyramids might be underground in strategic points on this planet that we still have no knowledge about, but maybe our government does.
Linda Moulton Howe, thank you so much for being with us